The underestimated species, Dr. Elena Vasquez, was reviewing stellar fusion data when the sky changed forever. Through her laboratory window at the International Space Research Facility in Geneva, she watched as massive shadows blotted out the afternoon sun, ships, enormous, crystalline vessels that seemed to bend light around their edges, hovering motionless above every major city on Earth. The communications array crackled to life across all frequencies. Simultaneously, the voice that emerged was cold, mechanical, translated through technologies humanity had never seen. Primitive species of the third planet, you have achieved basic faster-than-light capability. This triggers Protocol 847 of the Zephyrian hegemony. You have 72 standard hours to surrender unconditionally. Resistance will result in total planetary sterilization. Compliance will result in integration as a labor class within our empire. Elena dropped her coffee mug. The ceramic shattered against the lab floor, but she barely noticed. Around her, fellow scientists stared at screens, at the sky, at each other. The weight of the moment pressed down like gravity itself had doubled. 10,000 years we have ruled this galaxy, the voice continued. 1,000 species have joined our empire. All have recognized the futility of resistance. Submit, and your species will survive. Defy us, and join the silence of extinct worlds. The transmission ended. Emergency sirens wailed across Geneva, across the world. Elena's hands shook as she reached for her phone. The call she made would change everything. Marcus, it's Elena. Are you seeing this? Her voice was steady despite the chaos erupting around her. Captain Marcus Chen's voice crackled through from the Houston Space Center. Seeing it, Elena. They've parked a ship the size of Manhattan over NASA. What are you thinking? I'm thinking they made a mistake, Elena said, her scientist's mind already racing. They called us primitive. They gave us time. And they're underestimating what desperate humans can accomplish. The next 18 hours were a blur of government meetings, military briefings, and scientific conferences. World leaders debated surrender, while military commanders calculated impossible odds. One Zephyrian vessel carried more firepower than every nuclear weapon on Earth combined. Their fleet numbered in the thousands, but Elena wasn't attending meetings. She was in her lab, surrounded by a growing group of physicists, engineers, chemists, and anyone else with advanced degrees and a willingness to think impossibly. They called themselves the Underground, though they operated in broad daylight. Show me their energy signatures again, Elena demanded, staring at the data streaming from every observatory on Earth. And in orbit, Dr. Yuki Tanaka, a quantum physicist from Tokyo who had arrived that morning, pulled up the readings. Their shields operate on crystalline matrices that resonate at specific frequencies. Their propulsion systems use controlled gravitational fields, very advanced, but but predictable, Elena finished. They've been using the same technology for millennia. No innovation, no adaptation. They don't need to change because nothing challenges them. The room fell silent, except for the hum of computers processing terabytes of observational data. Elena stood, her dark eyes scanning the faces around her. These weren't soldiers. They were thinkers, dreamers, problem solvers. The very people the Zephyrians had dismissed as primitive. They see us as insects, she said. But insects survive because they adapt. We've had fusion power for 30 years. We've manipulated quantum fields for 15. We've been experimenting with gravitational lensing for a decade. We might not have their technology, but we understand the physics. Dr. Sarah Ogoy from the University of Lagos raised her hand. The fusion plants. Every major city has them. If we could overload them simultaneously, create resonance cascades, the electromagnetic pulse would disrupt their shield matrices, Yuki added, excitement growing in her voice. For maybe 60 seconds. 60 seconds is enough. Marcus's voice came through Elena's phone on speaker. If you can drop their shields, we can hurt them. We've been repurposing every rocket, every satellite, every piece of orbital debris into kinetic weapons. Alina smiled for the first time since the ships arrived. They expect surrender or military resistance. They don't expect us to turn our entire civilization into a weapon. The plan that emerged was insane, beautiful, and uniquely human. Every fusion reactor on Earth would be synchronized to overload at precisely the same moment, creating a global electromagnetic cascade. The pulse wouldn't destroy the Zephyrian ships, but it would disrupt their shields and sensors for crucial moments. In those moments, everything humanity had put into space over the past century would rain down on the invaders, not as planned weapons, but as improvised projectiles accelerated to incredible speeds. Old satellites, spent rocket stages, construction, materials from orbital platforms, even specialized debris specifically crafted in the last 48 hours. It's going to work, Alina whispered, watching the final calculations scroll across her screen. It has to work. The Zephyrians, meanwhile, waited with the patience of a species that had conquered galaxies. Their High Commander, Zareth Cole, observed Earth from his flagship with something approaching boredom. The primitive species below were behaving exactly as expected. Governments were panicking, populations were fleeing, and their military forces were arranging themselves in futile defensive positions. Commander, his tactical officer reported, their energy readings have increased significantly. All power. Plants are operating at maximum capacity. Cole barely glanced at the data. Fear response. They're powering defensive systems that cannot touch us. Let them waste their energy. When the deadline arrives, we'll demonstrate the consequences of defiance by sterilizing their largest population centers. The survivors will be more compliant. He had no idea that beneath his ships, Alina Vasquez was making final adjustments to equipment that would synchronize every fusion reactor on Earth, that Marcus Chen was coordinating with every space agency and private space company to position their improvised weapons, that Yuki Tanaka was putting finishing touches on frequency calculators that would exploit flaws in technology thousands of years old. The countdown reached zero at exactly 14:30 GMT. Every fusion reactor on Earth overloaded. Simultaneously, the electromagnetic pulse that resulted was unlike anything in human history. It raced outward at the speed of light. A wave of organized chaos that interfered with every Zephyrian system in Earth's immediate vicinity. For 63 seconds, the crystalline shields that had protected Zephyrian ships for millennia flickered and failed. In those 63 seconds, humanity struck back. Kinetic projectiles, moving at significant fractions of light speed, hammered into Zephyrian hulls. Not with advanced weapons, but with repurposed junk accelerated to incredible velocities. A communications satellite from 1987 punched through the command deck of a destroyer. Construction steel from an unfinished space station shredded the engines of a cruiser. Even coffee cups and personal belongings jettisoned from the International Space Station found their targets. Zareth Cole's flagship shuddered as dozens of impacts registered across its hull. Alarms wailed throughout the bridge as damage reports flooded in. This was impossible. The primitive species had no weapons capable of penetrating Zephyrian armor. Yet his shields were down, his engines were damaged, and his tactical displays were showing losses across the fleet. How? He demanded, his voice filled with something he hadn't experienced in centuries. Fear. The electromagnetic pulse, Commander, his science officer stammered. It exploited resonance frequencies in our shield matrices. Our own technological consistency became a vulnerability. They used their entire planetary infrastructure as a single weapon. Cole stared at the tactical display showing Earth below. Red markers indicated dozens of Zephyrian ships with varying degrees of damage. Some were destroyed outright, their crystalline hulls shattered by impacts no one had thought possible. Others were crippled, leaking atmosphere and struggling to maintain orbit. They turned their civilization into a weapon, he whispered. In 72 hours, they analyzed our technology and turned their weaknesses into our downfall. But the humans weren't finished. As Zephyrian shields slowly came back online, new readings appeared on their sensors. The fusion reactors that had caused the pulse were cycling up again, but differently this time. The electromagnetic signature was changing, evolving, adapting. Alina Vasquez stood in her ruined laboratory, surrounded by equipment pushed far beyond safe operating parameters. Screens flickered with data that would have been impossible to obtain without Zephyrian technology to analyze. But they had that, now. Wreckage was raining down across Earth, and every piece of alien technology was being studied, reverse-engineered, and understood. They expected us to surrender or die, she said, to the communications array broadcasting to underground cells worldwide. They didn't expect us to learn. Marcus, how long until the next phase? Orbital platforms are online, Marcus reported. From Houston, we're not just fighting back now, Alina. We're hunting them. High above Earth. Improvised human weapons platforms cobbled together from space station components and reverse-engineered. Zephyrian technology began tracking the alien ships. The electromagnetic pulse had been just the beginning. Now came the real test of human ingenuity. The species the Zephyrians had called primitive was about to show them what desperation, creativity, and scientific fury could accomplish when given 72 hours to prepare for war. Zareth Cole's hands trembled as he sent an emergency transmission to the Hegemony High Command. Request immediate reinforcements. The primitive species they have surprised us. This will not be the easy conquest we anticipated. But Alina Vasquez was already 3 steps ahead, planning attacks that would reach beyond Earth's atmosphere, beyond the solar system, to the very heart of the Zephyrian Empire. She had learned something crucial in these first desperate hours. Of war, the Zephyrians were advanced, but they were also predictable. They had grown comfortable, overconfident, set in ways that had worked for 10,000 years. Humans, on the other hand, had never been comfortable. They had always been desperate, always adapting, always finding new ways to survive against impossible odds. And now, for the first time in their history, they were truly angry. The war was just beginning, and humanity was about to teach the galaxy. What happened when you underestimated the species that had crawled up from a gravity well through pure stubbornness and ingenuity? The Zephyrian hegemony had ruled for 10 millennia. But they had never faced anything like desperate humans with something to prove. Asterisk, when stars become weapons 6, months after the first electromagnetic pulse shattered Zephyrian arrogance, Alina Vasquez stood on the observation deck of humanity's first interstellar warship. The vessel had no official name in any Earth language. The underground simply called it the Answer. Built from reverse-engineered Zephyrian technology and human innovation, it looked nothing like the crystalline ships of their enemies. Where Zephyrian vessels were elegant and uniform, the answer was a patchwork of technologies from dozens of human cultures. Chinese fusion cores powered Russian gravitational manipulators. American kinetic systems worked alongside European quantum computers. African solar collectors fed energy to Australian communication arrays. It was ugly, asymmetrical, and absolutely terrifying in its potential. "Status report," Alina said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had helped coordinate humanity's impossible victory in those first crucial days. Captain Marcus Chen, now wearing the improvised uniform of what media had started calling the Terran Defense Corps, consulted his displays. Long-range sensors show Zephyrian reinforcements approaching the outer system. 12 dreadnoughts, 40 cruisers, and support vessels. "They're not underestimating us this time." Dr. Yuki Tanaka looked up from her quantum analysis station. "Their shield frequencies have been modified. They've learned from our first attack. The electromagnetic pulse trick won't work again." Alina nodded. She had expected this. The Zephyrians were ancient, not stupid. But humans had been learning too, and much faster than their enemies anticipated. "Show me the stellar data," she commanded. The main display shifted to show a three-dimensional map of nearby star systems. Red markers indicated Zephyrian worlds. Blue markers showed the few human settlements that had been established in the past 6 months using captured enemy technology. But it was the yellow markers that drew Elena's attention. Those marked stars that met very specific criteria. "We've identified 17 suitable targets in Zephyrian core space," reported Dr. Ahmed Hassan, a stellar physicist who had joined the underground from Cairo. "All are main sequence stars with at least one inhabited world. All are within our new transportation network's range." The transportation network was humanity's greatest achievement since the war began. While the Zephyr used massive ships to travel between stars, humans had developed something far more elegant. They called it quantum tunneling, though the physics were more complex than that name suggested. By creating paired quantum entanglement fields, they could open temporary gateways between any 2 points in space, regardless of distance. The Zephyr had never seen anything like it because they had never needed to. Their empire was built on overwhelming force and technological superiority. They conquered through intimidation and firepower. The concept of quantum stealth and instantaneous deployment was foreign to their military doctrine. "Commence operation." "Prometheus," Alina ordered. Across the answer, systems hummed to life. In engineering, teams of humans and reprogrammed Zephyrian artificial intelligences worked together to open quantum tunnels to distant stars. In weapons control, specialized devices that looked like metallic flowers began to warm up. Each one contained enough exotic matter to destabilize a star's nuclear fusion process. The Zephyrian reinforcement fleet, still 3 days out from Earth, had no idea what was about to happen to their homeworlds. TIE Commander Zareth Cole, now bearing scars from humanity's first surprise attack, studied intelligence reports in his private quarters aboard the dreadnought Eternal Dominion. The primitive species had proven unexpectedly resourceful, but the hegemony's response would be overwhelming. This fleet carried enough firepower to crack continents. There would be no second chance for human cleverness. "Commander, his communications," officer interrupted. "We're receiving distress signals from the Altair system." Cole frowned. Altair was 12 light-years from Earth, deep within Zephyrian space. "What kind of distress signals?" "The star itself, sir. Something is wrong with the star. In the Altair system, the impossible was happening. The system's main sequence star, which had burned steadily for over 4 billion years, was suddenly experiencing massive instabilities. Nuclear fusion rates were increasing exponentially. Solar flares erupted with the force of supernovas. The star's chromosphere expanded, reaching toward the inner planet where 3 billion Zephyrians lived and worked. On Altair Prime, emergency sirens wailed as the sky burned brighter than it had ever burned before. Zephyrian families evacuated underground shelters while their government desperately tried to understand what was happening to their son, Dr. Yuki. Tanaka monitored the stellar collapse from the answer, her instruments tracking quantum signatures across impossible distances. Exotic matter injection successful. The star's fusion rate is increasing by 12% every hour. At this rate, it will reach critical instability in approximately 8 hours. How long until the Zephyrians figure out it's not natural? Marcus asked. They never will, Alina replied grimly. The exotic matter signature mimics natural stellar evolution. To them, it will look like their son simply decided to die. They have no experience with stellar engineering because they never needed it. Their empire expanded by conquering existing worlds, not by manipulating the physics that create worlds. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out in 16 other Zephyrian systems. Stars that had burned peacefully for billions of years suddenly began the process of rapid collapse. Some would become supernovas, sterilizing everything within dozens of light years. Others would expand into red giants, swallowing their planetary systems in nuclear fire. The Zephyrian hegemony, which had never lost a world to enemy action, was watching 17 of their core systems die simultaneously. Emperor Voss. Kethril received the reports in his throne room on the capital world of Zephyr Prime. The chamber was a masterpiece of crystalline architecture, walls that seemed to be carved from solid light. For 10,000 years, emperors had sat on the eternal throne, ruling a galaxy-spanning civilization that had never known defeat. 17 stars, he whispered, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. 17 systems dying at once. How is this possible? His science advisor, Ancient Morpeleth, consulted readings from across the empire. My emperor, the stellar destabilizations appear to be natural phenomena, but the timing suggests otherwise. The probability of 17 stars entering critical phases simultaneously is essentially zero. The humans, Kethril said, the word tasting like poison in his mouth. The primitive species from the third planet of an insignificant star. They did this? Impossible, my emperor. Stellar engineering requires technology we ourselves do not possess. They barely achieved faster than light travel. They cannot manipulate stars. But even as Peleth spoke, new reports arrived. Vega system, star unstable, for billions of Phorians, evacuating. Rigel system, solar activity beyond all measurement, colonies already lost. Deneb system, star expanding, outer planets already consumed. Emperor. Kethril rose from his throne, his ancient frame trembling with rage, and something he had never experienced in his 1,000-year reign. Fear. Recall all fleets. Every ship, every weapon, every warrior. Bring them home immediately. My emperor, the attack fleet approaching the human homeworld could still now. Kethril's voice shattered crystal formations throughout the throne room. The humans are not fighting a war. They are committing genocide on a stellar scale. Bring our forces home before they murder our entire civilization. But it was too late for some systems. In the Capella system, home to the Zephyrian Naval Academy, where officers had trained for 8,000 years. The star reached critical mass. What followed was visible from halfway across the galaxy. The supernova that had once been Capella erased 3 planets, 17 moons, and 12 billion Zephyrians in a flash of light brighter than 100 billion suns. The shockwave would sterilize everything within 50 light-years, including 6 other Zephyrian colonies. Elena Vasquez watched the light of dying Capella reach the answer's sensors 12 hours after the explosion. She felt no satisfaction, no joy in victory, only the grim certainty that this was necessary. The Zephyrian fleet is turning round, Marcus reported. All of them. They're abandoning the attack on Earth and heading back toward their core systems. Too late, Yuki observed. 14 more stars are past the point of no return. Even if they evacuate every world, they're looking at the loss of hundreds of billions of lives. Alina nodded. The mathematics were simple. 17 stellar systems contained approximately 40% of the Zephyrian population. When those stars died, the hegemony would lose nearly half their people in a matter of hours. The survivors would be scattered across hundreds of remaining worlds, their government shattered, their military in chaos. Prepare a transmission to the Zephyrian fleet. Alina ordered. The communication reached High Commander Zereth Cole as he watched his homeworld of Rigel Prime disappear into the expanding photosphere of its dying star. His family had lived there for 600 generations. Now it was gone, consumed by forces that should have been beyond the reach of any species, let alone the primitive humans he had dismissed months ago. Elena's face appeared on his view screen, calm and implacable. Behind her, the command center of the Answer bustled with activity as humans and reprogrammed. Zephyrian A is worked together to monitor the collapse of an empire. Hi, Commander Cole, she said, her voice carrying across the void between species. I am Dr. Elena Vasquez of Earth. I wanted you to understand what has happened here. Cole found his voice after a long moment. You have committed mass murder, on a scale unprecedented in galactic history. Billions of innocent beings. Exactly, Elena interrupted. Billions of innocent beings. That's what you threatened to do to us. Complete planetary sterilization, you said. The difference is that we actually did it. The transmission continued as Cole watched his civilization burn. Your empire has ruled for 10,000 years through fear and overwhelming force. You conquered 1,000 species because you were stronger, more advanced, more ruthless. But you made a crucial error. Alina leaned forward, her eyes reflecting the light of dying stars. You assumed that because we were younger, we were weaker. You thought that because we had less technology, we had less capability. You believed that. Because we were desperate, we were defeated. But desperation is not weakness, Commander. Desperation is the mother of innovation. Around Cole, his officers stared at displays showing the collapse of their civilization. 17 systems dying, evacuation fleets overwhelmed, billions of their people facing death by stellar fire. We spent months studying your technology, learning your weaknesses, understanding your limitations, Alina continued. Your empire is built on stagnation. 10,000 years of using the same tactics, the same strategies, the same assumptions. You became predictable. What do you want? Cole whispered. Peace, Alina replied simply. Complete withdrawal from all human space. Recognition of Earth's sovereignty. And a guarantee that no Zephyrian force will ever again threaten any human world. The ultimatum hung in space between them. Cole looked at his tactical displays, at the remnants of the fleet that had been sent to crush humanity, at the real-time feeds from dying stars that had once powered the heart of his empire. And if we refuse, Elena's expression didn't change. We've identified 43 more suitable stars in your remaining territory. Our quantum tunnel network can reach any of them within hours. Commander, we didn't just learn to weaponize stars. We learned to weaponize physics itself. The transmission ended, leaving Cole alone with the terrible mathematics of defeat. The Zephyrian Empire had started this war with overwhelming advantages: superior technology, vast fleets, the experience of 1,000 conquests. They had faced what they assumed was a primitive species, barely capable of interstellar flight. Instead, they had encountered something the galaxy had never seen before. A species that didn't just adapt to survive, but that fundamentally redefined the rules of warfare itself. Humans didn't fight like other species. They didn't accept limitations or assume that current technology represented permanent boundaries. When faced with extinction, they had learned to kill stars. 3 days later, Emperor Voskathrel transmitted the official surrender of the hegemony. The document was broadcast across the galaxy, reaching species that had lived under imperial rule for millennia. For the first time in galactic history, the Zephyrians were withdrawing, defeated by beings they had initially dismissed as insignificant. Elena Vasquez received the surrender while standing on the observation deck of the Answer, watching Earth turn slowly in the void below. The blue marble that had nearly died now anchored an interstellar civilization that could reach any point in the galaxy within hours. "What happens now?" Marcus asked, joining her at the VIEWPORT. Elena considered the question while watching stars twinkle in the darkness. Somewhere out there, 17 of them were dying or already dead, taking with them the worlds and civilizations that had orbited them for billions of years. The price of humanity's survival had been paid in stellar fire. "Now we make sure this never happens again," she said finally. "We explore, we learn, we grow. We find other species that might need protection from empires like the Zephyrians. And we remember what desperation taught us about the universe." She paused, thinking of all the human settlements now spreading across the galaxy through quantum tunnels, of the technologies being shared with species newly freed from imperial rule, of the possibilities opening up before a civilization that had learned to manipulate the fundamental forces of creation. The Zephyrians thought age equaled wisdom, that time meant power. Elena continued, but they forgot the most important truth in the universe. The youngest species, the ones fighting for survival, the ones with everything to lose, those are the ones that change everything. Behind them, the Answer's quantum drives hummed with power, ready to open doorways to distant stars. Humanity had earned its place in the galaxy not through conquest, but through the desperate ingenuity that turned impossible challenges into revolutionary solutions. The war was over. The age of human expansion had just begun, and somewhere in the darkness between stars, 17 suns continued their violent deaths, eternal monuments to what happened when an ancient empire made the mistake of threatening a species that had learned to weaponize hope itself. Asterisk.